We'll go ahead and get started. It's a work session. It is October 27th, 2014. Where we left off last time, we had agreed that we would go to the fee schedule. But before we go there, I just said I would open it up for it. Does anyone have any general questions before we go to the fee schedule of anything that we covered that you wanted to go back to at all? Seeing none. The fee schedule, I think what we'll do is we'll do like we have in the previous sessions this year, is we'll start on one end and just work our way down and see if there's any specific questions that anybody has, rather than just go through it page by page. It's okay if we hop around. Let's just try to get everyone's questions answered kind of as we go. And maybe by doing that, some people will have their questions answered before we get to you, but regardless, rather than just start with, appeals to the zoning board and then move forward and go to the next one. But, so Lynn, I'm gonna go ahead and start down on your end, if that's cool.
Sure. I guess the first question is how the rate schedule is structured. We have stuff on here now that we didn't have before that's crossed off, and we have stuff that's didn't have a fee before that does, so I'm wondering the mindset of that first. That might answer some of the specific ones I have.
Okay, Manager Gerard, go ahead.
The last, the last 3 pages of the fee schedule are new to the fee schedule, but they're not new fees or charges. Those are all fire department charges that had been in existence previously, but what we're doing is consolidating all of them into the fee schedule now. So you'll have everything in one place. With regard to the lineouts, some of the lineouts are simply name changes to correspond to zoning changes that have occurred through the zoning process, changes to the zoning ordinances. There are some that have been consolidated, so you'll see that they won't be there at all, and then there'll be a name change where they'll be included into. It's basically a living document based upon procedures and processes now, the way we've got staff assigned. All of the fees are designed to be full recovery, cost recovery, not profit, but cost recovery to at least cover our costs, and that's why you're seeing some proposed changes, because the last 2 years we've had a couple of wage increases and some benefit changes that have increased costs.
Okay, so to tie in a little bit with our last discussion on the fire department, 20,000, I need a little more clarification, I guess. What's the difference, and I don't know if this is for Bob or Manager Gerard or whatever. Somebody tell me the difference between public fire protection and private fire protection.
Well, I guess the simplest answer to that question, and Bob can jump in here too, is that the public side of it are the mains, basically, that we own. The private side of it is those mains that are, I'd have to say, constructed by outside sources and then turned over to the township. Lowe's, for instance, they do their own connection. Just as an example, they build the main to the connection to the main to their property and then deed that over to the township.
Oh, okay.
But the fees you see there, the private, is for their sprinkler system
That's
per
what
building.
I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that fee is paid monthly for the size of their pipe. So right now, with the figures I could find, it's roughly about $35,000 a year Kurt receives from those fees.
That was my second question, is how much is this generating? Okay.
And I remember that those lines are not metered, so if they ever do go off, there's no accounting for the water.
Right, it's just a,
They do test their
It's a fee.
sprinklers once a year, and they flow less than 50 gallons of water. A little history, in the last 39 years I've been here, we had one fire with the sprinkler system that was American and Marquette, and they have knocked off 3 sprinkler heads during construction or remodeling. during that time. So
Knocked them off, like closed them?
No,
Oh, bumped the
Broke 'em
big
off.
ones?
broke them right off the pipe.
Okay.
So over the last 39 years, they haven't really been a whole lot of water usage from them.
Okay, so I guess what I was looking at then, what we're talking about from the fire water, whatever, question, my first thought was debacle, but that's really not it either. What's in question is the $20 or $20,000 that's coming into, I should have had these tagged, dang it, into revenue. So we've got public fire protection, which is the mains. That's the 20,000 coming into the water fund from the fire department, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the 22 above that for private is what you were assuming would be the 35,000, you're guessing? It's budgeted at 22?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what the, what I could figure out with the figures we have.
Okay,
There's 42 businesses that have sprinkler systems with a total of 45 mains running to them. Some buildings have 2 mains, like Kohl's, they'll have 2 12-inch mains running into their buildings. The mall has 2. Penny's has 1. Yonkers has 1. So each one is separate.
so what do we do with the Penny's type business that's closed then? We're just,
The mall pays for that.
okay. It's not from their business, okay. So I guess I'm wondering, it makes sense because the fire department has a stake in the use of the water in the township. That's not unreasonable that there could be a charge for that. But it looks like there kind of already is, whether it's 20,000 or 35,000 or whatever the amount is. I'm just trying to wrap my arms around what we're gonna do going forward. If we're just gonna leave this budget static and go with it, or if we're gonna try to make a change in that 20,000 or what happens. And in looking at this again and again, it just seemed to me that there's already money coming from the public users that, I don't want to say supplement, but that accounts for, and again, whether this is the right amount or not, I don't really care. I'm thinking about how this difference between the fire and water is dealt with. Does that make sense?
To be clear, the revenue that you see going into the water department from private fire protection, those fees is not included in the amount for fire protection from the rate study of 2001. It only deals with what the cost is based upon the particulars that they use, including the size in the system, hydrants, all of that.
So if it does come to a discussion that we have to take 80,000 from the fire department, I don't know if we're gonna pursue that line at all, but there's actually 22,000 already contributing to that.
20,000, not, the other one is
The
totally
22 isn't
separate.
considered, wouldn't be
It's
considered?
separate from the public fire protection costs that were done by the rate consultants. And again, we're using, you can't really say even, I did it from a additional 83,000 standpoint for 103,000, but remember how I did it is the only way that I could even get close. So we took the actual number from 2001 from a rate study, and then I just used inflation rate multipliers to bring it up to 2014 dollars. But again, the caution there is that it could be totally different. We've put in the well system since then, a $5 million project, and that will get added into the system and factored in. What impact that would have on there, I can't say. I mean, we've got to do, like we talked about last time, if you want actual figures, you're gonna have to do the rate study. The number, I threw out 103,000 based upon inflation factors, but that could be, who knows where, right? once the rate consultants actually went through the entire thing. I mean, I have no idea where it would come from. I know we threw out the suggestion last time that if you had Public Works, Fire Department, and the general fund split the cost of doing a rate study. Randy did get a response back from somebody, and I'm sorry, Randy, it was like $27,000.
Excuse me, 27.5 for the full range of studies that we had talked about.
That's not bad. I was thinking 25, actually.
And that
Just-
would include not just trying to figure out, the fire department, but each individual department and what the water department should be given towards the general fund. Goes through our entire fee and rate structure and makes recommendations based upon where they're at. This firm that you got the quote from has done it for Marquette County previously, correct?
Yeah, they've, excuse me, they used to be called Maximus. They've been around here in the Marquette County area for somewhat over 20 years doing rate studies and cost of service studies, primarily for the county. They've been doing it for the county for a number of years. Recently, they merged with another company and became MGT of America. But it's the same people. Jim Olson is the individual who worked with the county staff, and even back when I was with the county, we were using them to do rate studies, cost of service studies.
Did you get a time frame roughly? I think Dennis thought maybe a year or something. Does that sound
It's
reasonable?
quick. I mean, we're a small job. We're a small job for them. The closest comparable that they had from a township standpoint was Redford Township, downstate, which is more sizable, so they didn't think it would take very long to do our study.
So we could have it by the next budget season?
Yes, that would be our target, was for the 2016 budget.
Okay. Okay.
You have something on that point, Dan?
Yes.
So Lynn, before you move on, Dan?
Well, I guess I'm still kind of, I understand the whole rate thing, but I'm looking at the fire protection private, and this is basically commercial. There's a lot of money generated there, and I don't know, maybe we could find out exactly how many 12-inch mains we're out there in the county, or in the township, how many 10-inch mains, how many 8-inch mains. We'll find out how much Kurt's actually getting under fire protection private, which is again, all the commercial buildings. I think, I don't understand why that wouldn't be a part of the rate study. I mean,
I think
like Bob said, I mean, these things have been going for 39 years, and they've been, Kurt's been collecting all this money every year, and you've never taken a drop of water out of it. So it's a heck of a savings account, if you ask me, where you're getting almost 100% interest rate because, so I mean to say that shouldn't be a part of the rate study doesn't make sense to me.
No,
I didn't say
Dennis
it
wasn't.
shouldn't be
No,
part of
he's
the
not
rate
saying
study.
that.
I said it wasn't
Wasn't
part of the rate
initially,
study,
but
I think
then.
it should be part of the rate
Okay,
study.
all right, that's what I mean, okay.
Yeah.
But if we could find out, I'd like to know exactly. I know at one point in time we did have that.
Yeah.
But
and I
maybe get
think
an
I know where I
updated
have
version
mine.
of this amount of 12-inch mains or
He
10-inch
could
mains or
probably-
8-inch
Yeah,
mains.
he gave us a list a couple years ago. We looked at that.
Yeah,
the
maybe we
last
could get an
one.
update on that.
Yeah. So, Randy, you were saying that at the end here, we didn't, on the new construction and stuff on fire code, we didn't actually have these? Is that the way I understood it? And now there are?
They are fees that previously existed, it's just you didn't have them reflected anyplace in your document. So this year we decided to add those on to the fee structure, so you've got the complete picture of all of the fees that are collected by the various township
Because
departments.
it didn't have a current, so I didn't know if
Right.
the rates had gone up.
No, they're basically, it's just a rollover. All it is just added on to the end of this structure.
Okay. I don't have a problem really with, I mean, from a board standpoint, from a business standpoint, obviously, I don't want any of these rates to go up. And I think, sometimes I forget that usually on every board, there's some kind of a cross of the different types of people you're representing. And as much as I try to keep my business out of this and just do it from a township perspective, I think I have to keep the business interest somewhere in front of this board. And this is going to be significant for those of us who use a lot of water. We have a balance. We've got a three-way balance between the residents who don't use a lot and get to vote on stuff that we do, and we've got the businesses who don't use a lot and can't vote. And then I'm an oddity who's a business who can vote, and it does affect me because I use a lot of water. So, you know, if I'm looking at 140,000 gallons of water in an extreme month for me, or 160 this year, the impact's going to be significant. Now, how many are there of us? I don't know if I would fall into the restaurant category. There's only a few of us that have pools, and I think mine's the biggest. So I'm trying to give you a scope here. As much as I realize we have to worry about the 1,000 and 2,000 gallon users, this is going to be a big impact for me, especially with the minimum wage increase and the mandatory health insurance at 30 hours, or, you know, offering it anyway. So I want to keep that in your mind, that when we make these increases, and I wish Kirk were here, not that he has to make his budget based on what I say, but that is a big concern for those of us who do use a lot of water, or who do have, I don't have the big mains. I think 1.5 or 2 inches, I think, is my biggest for coming into the pool. But don't be too quick to dismiss the businesses, especially because they can't really come in and say anything. They don't have any say in what happens. I mean, they can, but in most cases, they're a corporation somewhere else. And Randy's really good about saying, you know, the 1,000 or 2,000 gallon users, and that's probably a big part, not you, Randy Rotari. It's a big part of our constituency. But we're paying some huge taxes and some huge water expenses, and nobody defends those businesses. So I've tried to put a spreadsheet together to see what kind of an impact this is going to be. I haven't finished it yet because I want to put a whole year's worth in. But I'd just like you to keep that in the back of your mind. Actually, keep it in the forefront. But that's really all I had, because, you know, I don't, from a township board person, I don't have a lot of problem with the amount of raise. I don't know yet how I feel about I was hoping Kirk could be here, another employee, but maybe that's another discussion, because we're talking fees. So I turn it over to Miss Diana.
Well, as far as this, like Lynn said, I mean, I'm probably not in 1,000, 2,000 user either. I'm probably like 3,000 or 4,000. But, I mean, I don't like them to go up, but from a board standpoint, like she said, you know, if the rates to make Kirk's thing to balance, then I don't really like the idea, but as far as questions, Lynn had the one that I was wondering, so, no.
That's it? Thanks, Diana. Ernie?
Lynn answered some of the questions on the back were all these additional ones, because that's the first question I had, is when I saw all those in that too. But staying in that same area, you have the Fire Board of Appeals hearing, and I looked at that, $400, okay. Are we doing this now?
Not to my knowledge.
There, basically, in place if there ever is an appeal, but we've never, it's like the zoning board,
Property maintenance appeals.
probably made there, you know, from our operations, we have it, but there's never been an appeal.
So the question I have is, do we have any policy or procedures for this? Because under what conditions are they gonna come to the appeals? Do we have it in an ordinance and that too?
It would be fire ordinance is what governs it. And these things have these have been in existence right along. Like I said, they're just being rolled onto this form that
Okay.
you've got them all in place. They're not new.
I've never seen it, that's why it kinda
Yeah,
jumped out at me.
And that's why we decided this year to add all of the fees onto the fee structure to do They rarely get used, I mean, there's.
I never seen it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I never
Some of
seen
these
it
fees
either.
I never seen.
That was
So,
new to me.
Ron and Rob, these are the fees.
But we do have a write-up on it.
I'm assuming we do.
I think
I'll
that's,
find
The
out.
ordinance. It comes out of the ordinance, the fire ordinance, fire code.
we want to make sure we do have it, so we have the documentation there, so. Okay. One thing that's bothered me year in and year out, when I look at thawing water lines and sewer lines and the regular businesses, the regular business hours, the question I have is, if they're working anyway, are we talking about residential, or are we talking about business in that? Because water lines you can thaw out in that, and same with when you're shutting things off. You can't shut off a sewer line. And there's some cost in it for shutting off sewer lines, so the only thing I can think of, it's gotta be a business in that, not a residential.
Yeah, if there's break, it has to be shut off. You have to isolate where the break is.
But that's the only time you'd shut it off then.
And they have to work on a section of it that needs to be exposed, when they shut it off on either side, they have to isolate it.
Because I look at my sewer line, the only way you shut it off is turn the power off. And that's the only way. But on a gravity line, you can't do that.
Grab the lane, you still have to be able to segregate sections out.
Yeah.
You have to break. You don't have it, then you can
Somehow or other you have to do it, and it's gonna be difficult, so. Put a padlock on the toilets in the house, and that's about the only thing you can do.
Without it, then I have to go door to door and know these people that
Yeah.
be in town for the break. It's not something that typically you schedule, I mean, it happens and then you have to react to it.
Going through all these proposed fees and that, and then I looked at the water tap-in fees are going up, single family 1,000, and the other properties without prepaid 1,000 and that, and here again, I don't have anything in writing from Kurt as to why that's going up at all, and that. And part of the reason I'm questioning some of these now, I had talked to the manager just at a function here last week about fees and that, and he says, we put their fees, and some of them, what he did was he went through and run a cost analysis of all these to cost justify it. So the board had a list of what it was costing and why they wanted to increase it. And I thought that was fantastic, because it made it real easy. We really don't have any idea when you raise it, why in that, other than you raising it in that. So that's one of the things I'd like to bring up too, some of those things on that. And I go back to the water volume rate and wastewater rate. When I looked at the wastewater rate, and I went back and looked at the actual budget that was presented, and going through that, and I went through it again this afternoon, and I spent a lot of time on that. And I said, when I got through with it, I can't justify 24 cents a thousand on that, looking at the figures that was given to me in that. There's just no way that I can justify that at this point in time. So that's something that's gonna have to be looked at further, because
I'm sorry, you can't justify what?
I can't justify the 24 cents a thousand
Wastewater?
in wastewater, just looking at the figures that was given, and that, so.
What figures, Ernie?
I'm looking at on the wastewater budget that was presented to us. Now, going through everything in that, and I went through it, and it just didn't make sense to me, you know. As I looked at the sales, projected sales, 998,000, and through June, they had sales of 877, or 438,516. You double that 877, so you're talking on a projected total that they're talking about another $120,000 they're gonna have to generate. When you go to the last report from Lois, they're at 59% of their budget through August. So that means you got 40% going to have to be picked up in the next 4 months. And I just don't think that's feasible either. So I don't know where some of these sales dollars are coming from and how they can justify it. It just doesn't, they don't add up at this point in time. So then when you go to the end and look at the end of it, look at the revenue and expenditures, total expenditures is, they're looking at 1,157,000, they're looking at this year, estimated total 170. When you look at through June, 400,000, 450. So you're talking a little under 900,000 when you double it. So you still got a couple 100,000 that they're gonna have to pick up somewhere in expenditures, and things can happen. I understand that. But I just can't, in my mind, until some figures come up, justify the 24 cents a thousand on it. Because there's nothing, there's no narrative, no nothing on it in that. So, that's one of the questions I have. Now I can go back to where I was. Have we been charging for parcel, first division, second division additional? Because now it's proposed, which means that we either been charging or we have set up a new rate.
Now, we've been charging it in a different manner. Now they're breaking it down to quarter sections.
Okay. Even on the water rate, there's 13 cents a thousand in that. And sure, it's not gonna hit me that hard, but some of the bigger users it is, so I think we have to be very careful if, when we do all this, as to how we can justify it now. And one thing that Lynn brought up, I'm gonna touch further on, is additional personnel, which I said before, that until someone comes up with some justification for it, there's no way that I can support that without some kind of documentation as to why we're not getting the work done, how much is being done here and how much is not being done, and how many hours are spent on this and that, and we're still short that. So those are the things I'm used to seeing in that. So that's, Lynn answered a lot of questions, or brought up a lot of them that I had, so. I just have a few things on that, so. Those are my questions, and where I'm at this point in time, so. The rate increases, it's hard to justify when you're looking at the actual proposed budget that's been presented. On that 24 cents, I said, the only thing I can justify is additional people when you look at the budget, and that's where I stand at this point in time, so. These are the questions I have that's gonna have to be answered before I can support that. That's it.
Thanks, Ernie. Clerk Terry.
Yeah, I don't have too much problem with everything here, although my comments were said before. I don't have to rehash those. I'd like to thank Lynn for bringing that comment up about the businesses. I'm well aware of those situations we have out there. However, businesses can, and I know there has to be a fine line there, they can charge a little bit more to cover those additional costs, where fixed income people can't really do that. So that's one of the things right there. And I know, talking with Lynn before, you have to have a fine line with your rates and with, for instance, like your room rates and different things, because if they get too expensive, people aren't going to stay there. So you have to try to keep them low. And even $1 increase a room could, hurt you, possibly. But that's on like the hotel side. I know a lot of restaurants in the township. I know the prices have gone up. And like I went in the store the other day and saw what a pound of hamburger cost. The last time I looked, it was $2.99. Now it's $4.99. So things have went up pretty dramatically in the grocery stores. And just a comment on Treasurer Johnson's. I don't know. He was commenting on the sales, if we are going to be short on sales through a certain portion of the year. Well, if you're short in sales, you have to make it up from somewhere, and that's where part of the rate structure comes from. I'm sure that extra person is part of that rate structure, but I think if you're short in sales with the dollar amounts we were talking about, Kirk was trying to make a fine line and trying to make that up, I'm thinking. Is that correct, Ernie, the way I've understood when you were speaking?
I don't know, I'm just looking at the projected revenue coming in from information we have to date, and that even the 24 cents probably will not generate enough to do
Yeah,
that. And
Well-
you have to go back to 2013. He had a windfall of 23 cents back then, too. So
Yeah. Well, this summer was a bad summer for water sales. It was cool and wet. We didn't sell. And then another thing, your wastewater customers, we have a lot smaller base than the water customers. So any shortfalls are a little bit, have to be brought up more with the wastewater folks because we don't have as many of them to cover that cost than we do the water folks. There's some, most people are on both, but there's a certain percentage that it just are water and not wastewater. And with a smaller wastewater customer base, any shortfalls are a little bit more magnified. And I know where you're coming from with the justification of these rate increases, but I remember back in early September when our neighbors to the east, the city commission, went through their rate structure and their fees, and their water and sewer rates went up by 5%. And the only thing that they told the residents was, I remember one commissioner says it was a cool, wet summer and we had to raise rates 5%. And they made the motion, seconded it, and passed it. They didn't justify anything. I think we're going beyond and above what most folks do, which is probably good. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm just using that as an example that the group, our friends to the east just said 5% increase, no justification, and moved forward. So, but those are my comments. I don't have any problems with the fee structure as it stands right now. That's it.
Thanks, Clerk Rattari. Dan?
Well, again, Lynn answered one of my questions. I'd like to shift over to the fee schedule for the fire codes review. I'm still confused on this. You're saying that this has always been in there, but the only, again, if you look at the crossouts under the fire suppression fee schedule, there's nothing in there that comes close to what this looks like. And I guess I'm assuming proposed means that this is going to be increased or whatever because we don't have any currents. So I'm kind of confused as to why we have a proposed and a no current. Secondly, I guess my question is if I was a contractor, I'm assuming, and I'm not sure, but I would wonder why I'm paying the township fee schedules for reviews that I'm sure the county also does. It seems like a duplication of, I'm sure the county inspectors have their fire code review that they have to do under that. So I guess my question is why are we doing it twice? I mean, and if we're going to be doing this, who's getting the money for this fee schedules? Start with those questions.
Manager Gerard?
Questions for the fire marshal?
Are these, do you know that underneath those, the fire department codes for the new construction remodel fire code review, have we never charged that before that you're aware of?
This was simply a rollover from the fire department. It was submitted to be added to the
Fee schedule here.
schedule that they can file.
Okay, so we don't know what the
Questions
current,
specifically about how often, how many, where the money goes would be back to the fire marshal.
okay.
Well, okay. Then I guess my question would be is why wasn't the fire marshal present when we were doing our board review? I mean, the department has a fire chief, so I would assume that he would be over the fire marshals. He should be knowing where these fee schedules came from.
Yeah, I would assume that the chief would have known too, however, he just slid out the door. I wasn't sure that he was gonna get questions on it.
So that's my problem with that. And again, the question is, I mean, this is some pretty hefty fees here, and I guess my question is this not already being done by the county? And I know we've talked about, being friendly with, making it easy for contractors when they come in here, and this just seems to me like it's just an added expense. I don't know for sure, but, and again, if the fire marshal's the one that's doing all this, should the money not be going into the fire fund, not the township fund? Because we're basically using him, taking away his duties, other duties that he should be doing as a fire inspector, marshal, whatever. That's my questions concerning that, so I'd like to find out about that. And I think you know my feelings concerning the rate increases. I mentioned it last time that just doing the math, by not hiring this extra person, we can eliminate the rate increases as well as the opportunity to give the $12,000 to the manager. I think if I looked at it from a budgetary standpoint, I would say that at this time, this year, I don't see it feasible to hire a second person. I think it would, going on Lynn's comments and going on other people's comments, you know, Randy made the comment that hamburgers went up $2 a pound. Well, the average senior citizen out there on a fixed income, that's a lot of money for $2 a pound. And now you want, you know, we're throwing extra thing. Maybe it would be nice one year that, I mean, if he doesn't hire a person, you know, and like Ernie said, I mean, he's just saying, well, I can't get my work done. Well, what work can't you get done? Why can't you get it done? Is it a managerial problem that maybe we could manage our people better? I don't know. But that's basically all I have under the rate schedule.
Thanks, Dan. Pete?
Going over my notes over here, I got, we're looking at 2014-15, all indications that we're going to have another bad winter, cold winter, and a wet summer. So I think our water functions are going to be dropping off, the usage especially for sprinklers and that. I think the fire department, the new pumping station is pretty important, and I think they should try to do something to get that into it and make it a priority in getting that thing done. As our chief said how important it is. I think to put more emphasis on that and get that done, get it funded. And 20,000, the rate study, we should be doing that. I guess it started already in 2015. Leave it as it is right now. And then also the study would bring in the whole water department. The other question about the stuff that proposed and that, Randy answered that for me, and what that was before, and I guess I'd like to find out from the fire marshal where it was and stuff like that also. I don't have a problem with the budget. Nobody likes it. I pay about $100 and some for water, just alone for the water, so mine would go out too also, so, as a resident. But I do believe that we need another person in the Public Works Department. Them guys worked very hard last winter. I think I'd like to get some more people in there to get the work done, not so much that, but, and also training. And that's the way I feel. That's why I've always worked that way. You look at different things, what should be done, what shouldn't be done, and plan ahead so you don't get in a shortcoming, because you don't hire people to pick up where the other guy left off. Some of our elderly employees get a lot of knowledge, and that's the purpose of hiring new people, work with the old ones, and then do it that way. And some of the small jobs that were not done, couldn't get to it because of the bad winter and stuff like that, that would help it, and we'd get these jobs done. We got a lot of grinders out there. We have to have people working on grinders, and you know, when we redo them and rebuild them and stuff like that. So our service response is good. A couple of people start bragging them up how good they are. So we told our Kirk last year to stay within 2%. He stayed within 2%. I can't find fault with that. Do you like to do that? Well, it's a necessary evil. We're a growing community, and we just have to do what he has to do. So I'm comfortable with it, but I'd like to see that, you know, Danny and the fire department look at that pumping station that we never heard about before. You know, it's always been on there, you know, and it's what the chief just informed us last time how important that what it would do for that end. So I'd like to see that somehow, would give them the money to get that thing done next year, so. That's it.
Thanks, Pete. Manager Gerard, anything to add on the fee schedule?
No, not really. We can get some questions answered.
Okay. I guess my comments on the fee schedule is that, yeah, I don't understand the fire fees. I know that we have always had the fire marshal and fire inspector have worked to review all the plans for everything that comes through. But I can't answer the question, Dan, on the fee, because this just came into our fee structure this year from Ron. The way it was explained to me was that it had always been part of the fire department and part of the fire marshal's review. And this year we attempted to put all the fees into one area so that if you're looking for a fee, it's not like, oh, well, that one's not in this part, it's in another one. And I just assumed that, you know, under the proposed was the same as what had always been collected, but it's a great question. You know, I don't know that. And you're right about where does the revenue show up then, because as fire department revenue, if this is fire marshal having to do the new construction remodel fire code reviews, I would assume that revenue goes back to the fire department. But I haven't seen it. I have never seen a line item revenue that shows that here's the money that came from fire marshal review. And I think it's a great question. We'll get answered. Maybe Lois knows the answer to that question, but certainly, you know, where that shows up at. But I've never seen it broken out, so I don't know where they're lumping it into. Is it just lumped under revenue from, you know, public fire protection? I mean, I don't have a clue. I can't believe that those are new fees that we've never collected before. And I know that he has to sign off on the plans for us, and I don't believe we're duplicating anything from the county. The county doesn't have a fire plan. You know, it's our fire marshal that has to sign off on any new construction or remodels. So to answer your question, I'm positive that it's not a duplication of anything that the county requires. Ron has to sign off on all the plans, because I know I've been involved with a few of them where a developer wasn't exactly in agreement with Ron on what was required for his facility, although Ron looks at it from having to meet code and that there's no wiggle room, that it meets the minimum code for fire protection. So I know I've been inside of those conversations before, but we will get those questions answered. As far as the rate structure goes on the water volume rate or the wastewater volume rate, the 14-cent increase on water, 24 cents per 1,000 gallons on wastewater. I don't have any problem with that. He stayed within the 2% that the board arbitrarily put on him. I look at it again, you know, you guys have heard it from me a million times about, you know, how the rates get set. It's the last number that gets plugged in. So when you wonder where the rates come from, it's exactly it's the absolute last number that gets plugged into the formula as you build the public works budget. And they were within the 2% as he plugged them in with what we had moving forward. If we eliminate or don't agree with his request for an employee, what will that impact the rates be? We can pull that information out on what that looks like by eliminating $21,000 from the water budget or $21,000 from the wastewater budget and see what kind of impact it has, but it's going to be minor. It'll be cents, not dollars. I do believe that we need to do the rate study and our entire fee structure like we discussed last time. I think that moving forward, just you know, $27,000 from this first one, and we'll certainly put it out for request for proposals, and maybe it'll come in a little bit less than that, but I would think that it's probably a fair ballpark assumption that we're gonna spend $27,000 getting an extensive study done, but is it worth it if we're gonna use it? And I think, how do you justify spending the $27,000? Well, it comes, again, if we split it three ways, general fund, fire department, and public works, we get the information. As long as a board, we're willing to use the information, I think it's money well spent. If we spent $27,000 and then didn't act on it, it's probably not money well spent. But I think once you've done it, it's not something that you would have to update annually or every 3 years. I think that you could base some assumptions on that for maybe 10 years before, unless you had major changes to any of your systems, that you would be able to base those assumptions for a good 10 years. And maybe it's kind of a, we have to talk about it as a board philosophy, or our policy is that, do we do this every 10 years and, moving forward? And once you have the system in place, it will probably be a lot easier to update it accordingly as you needed to. And again, when you made major changes, when we complete the well system, those kind of major changes where you spent $4 or $5 million upgrading a system, certainly could have some impacts on cost allocation. So then it would, behoove the board to probably pay to have the system updated. I don't think it would be a $27,000 update either. I think once you've got it in place, it becomes a heck of a lot easier from a rate steady standpoint to come in and use the information that exists. And we could even probably ask some of those questions as we look to find out who could do that work for us, what it would cost us to update it a few years down the road should there be major changes to any of our systems, whether it was in the fire department or the public works. So I hope that the board will consider that. And in fact, we can probably have that on the next agenda for a discussion item, just to see what the board's prerogative is moving it forward. I think Lynn is right about, businesses get impacted, but at the same time, when you start talking about a 14-cent increase per 1,000 gallons, and somebody with a pool that runs a business that's very high water use, yeah, they definitely have some more impact than myself. But I agree with Clerk Rattari. I mean, the cost of business goes up, and you have to make those adjustments accordingly. I think we got to be careful, as long as we still continue to be a great place to locate a business in and take a ride around. We've still got people who are buying lots and putting in businesses nonstop as we go, so I don't think we've priced ourselves out of the market yet. I think that the city, if you looked at any of the information on their budget process this year, they had proposed major increases to a variety of their fees throughout the city to recapture some costs that haven't kept up with the times. And most of them ended up not being moved forward by the city commission, other than the 5% across the board rate increase on their water and wastewater rates. And it's not a surprise to anybody, the last year, what we had and the amount of expenditures that were put out by not only us, but municipalities all across Michigan. And certainly the UP from a rough winter. We don't know what this winter holds. We can have another one back to back again and suddenly find ourselves another extra $100,000 in costs that we may or may not get reimbursed as we move forward. I think you have to kind of plan accordingly. I think Superintendent Page has done a good job with it. Some of you asked, like, how do you justify where that money, why we would hire someone else? In my conversations with Superintendent Page, talking about the necessity of hiring somebody, he can give you a list, if that will help your decision process, about what doesn't get done. I mean, if you ask him, what are we not getting done, he'll tell you that we're getting everything done, but are we getting it done to the degree that he's comfortable with? Are we keeping up with exercising valves, hydrants, that kind of thing? Especially when we had the winter that we had, he just doesn't have the ability to do so. Certainly we've kicked around plenty of ideas. building and grounds, should building and grounds just be assigned back to Superintendent Page and be under the umbrella of Public Works? We've got 2 guys working building and grounds now. Would it make more sense to have Superintendent Page instead of Manager Gerard be responsible from a management standpoint of building and grounds, house them in the same facility, and he would be able to set schedules accordingly in an emergency situation? So, does that make sense? I think that's a possibility, and, I had that conversation with Superintendent Page and Manager Gerard during the budget process, that it's an option that we should probably explore as a township. Those are administrative decisions that those guys need to make. Not necessarily board decisions, but it should have, come back as an administrative decision that, hey, we're gonna make do with who we have. Personally, I think Kirk was more than convincing when he shared the information with Clerk Rattari and I on how, why he needed somebody. Manager Gerard makes the case that we can do 2 and have better coverage from a service standpoint to our customers. I don't know if we need it. I haven't seen a tremendous amount of complaints about our service coverage. I think we've done a commendable job of servicing folks. When we get the calls, we answer those calls. Would we do a better job if we had, 2 more guys? Well, they could rearrange the schedule, eliminate the 410s. Everybody goes to a 5-day work week and split shifts, and there's always 2 guys working and they're spread out. Eliminate some overtime. Would that work? Probably. Am I concerned that, if we go a year without hiring this person, that we won't be able to maintain our system? Not entirely. I think that, nothing's falling apart in a year, but I think that if we take that standpoint moving forward and we let it go another year, it's just that the cost of not providing that regularly scheduled maintenance that we should be doing could end up in the long run costing us more than putting somebody on. Like I said, the impact from a volume rate on water or wastewater is minuscule for having that person in there. Taking them out and saving a penny that nobody will even notice in their bill has me more concerned than making sure we get the maintenance done. To justify it for me, it's easy. The last time we hired somebody, when you go back and start looking at when we hired someone, and I pull out the budgetary staffing service impacts and talk about when we hired somebody, what year was it, and when was the last time that we had really increased anything in the building and grounds. 2007 we had somebody, and then we build it up and get somebody else involved. We leave it vacant for a while and let service workers cover it. Now we've got 2 building and grounds guys. Do we justify it? Well, if you look at what we've got those guys doing, they're taking care of 3 facilities. We certainly have expanded the offerings at Lions Field. The ice rink's coming up. We probably do have plenty of work for building and grounds, but do we need 2 guys? I don't know. Can one of them be a service worker? Yeah, I think if we go into it with the idea that they're a service worker or entry-level service worker, maybe they're more of a service worker than a building and grounds person. Or are we going to take care of that ice rink on the weekends? Are we going to try to do it with volunteer, or are we going to break up our building and grounds so that we have coverage on the weekend to make sure that that place is cleaned off, ready to go, locked up at nights? I mean, there's a lot of things that I think Manager Gerard needs to make some decisions or recommendations on. If you look at service worker, and when's the last time we created anybody? 2008, created an additional service worker position. Well, from 2008, what's happened with our taxable value, just our SEV, you look at the increase in there, 223 million to 275 million. That, is a sizable, $52 million increase. And what that's done is increase the amount of infrastructure we have, which puts more of a strain on service workers. Can we justify, after having that type of an increase in taxable value that came about because businesses were added. As those businesses and certainly homes were added, we've created more work. Can I justify that? Yeah, I can understand why he needs somebody to do that job just based on looking at the staffing needs when we've made the adjustments, how much we've grown, and are we projecting to stop growing, or are we projected to continue to grow? While things have slowed down maybe somewhat over the last couple of years, we haven't seen a real slowdown in our growth. We continue to see new businesses and, talk of residential developments like Mason's Bluff on a regular basis. So I'm totally comfortable with Kirk's. I'm totally comfortable with the need to increase, the minor amounts that we're increasing. But I think, from my standpoint, I could easily, pass the budget and the fee schedule as presented, but we will get these questions answered. I think Dan had some great questions on the fire stuff. I mean, is that going to the fire department? If not, why not? Where else would it be going? Have we charged it in the past? I think we need to have those questions answered. The rate study will be on the next agenda. Lynn wants a breakout of the connections on that private fire protection, and I'll have that available as soon as I talk to Kirk and get it back out to you guys. Ernie, I've got some of your stuff written down that I'm going to hand straight to Kirk and ask him to reach out to you and see if he can't provide you what you're looking for, on some more dollars and cents things. Because I think it's important that you feel comfortable with being able to make your decision. And I think I've got everybody's, I hopefully took good notes. I will send it out and try to get the answers back so everybody had them before we meet again at any rate. Dan?
One other question I got, because true that our volume rate for wastewater and for water, Kurt's asking for increases. But he's also asking increases for our base monthly fees for the meters. I mean, when we get into 8-inch meters, it's $110 more a month. Going from $6 to $7. So I don't know if that's falling in within the 2%. I don't really know if I didn't really figure it out. But I would like to also, plus the fact that we're getting how many sized mains we have, if we can also get a total of meters, how many meters we have and what sizes. I guess just to give me some idea.
Ernie?
If I remember right, I think the 8-inch meter, the only one we have is in Lost Creek, and that's the extent of it.
Yep.
Two other large ones, they're not 8-inch, but there's two other larger ones, and the rest are all smaller. I think there's two 6-inch, and the rest are 4s and 2s.
There isn't that many from 3 inches on up.
We can update that list. I mean, that list.
We got
I
it,
think
yeah.
Lynn's correct. It was 2 years ago that he put that list together. When the board made a decision to change the fee structure to move some of these costs to the businesses.
Dennis?
Yep, Pete?
Danny asked a question about the fire, the fire money see, that's a type of a good question. If he would have answered, it was tipped off Manager Gerard or someone, we could have had this fire marshal there to answer it, because we come here and have these questions and we like to get the answers. You don't want to come back and redo the whole thing again. I know you'd like to talk to, I asked all the questions in session, but you could still ask a question, but it would have been nice to have him here to answer that question. I was surprised that, 3 of them did not know anything about that, so.
Well, if I can respond to that, actually, I believe we were told to ask department heads if we had questions, and I asked the department head, and he didn't know anything about it, so. And Manager Gerard apparently doesn't know anything about it, so.
If I'd have been asked a question, I could have found out.
Yeah, would have had or had the guy here to take care of it. But it was a good question. I'm surprised that we don't know, but especially you, because you know everything.
Some of
about
you guys
fire.
had questions like with Kirk, and I didn't ask them to be here tonight because I knew we were just going through the fee structure for the first time, and rather than bring everybody in and have Lois and Kirk and Ron and everybody here, it was just kind of like I didn't know where we're going to go, so I figure if we get through it and get some questions, I'll get them out to you, and if it's not answered to your satisfaction, we'll certainly have them for the next budget session.
Dennis?
Yep.
I think there's a lot of merit to what you said. First of all, before I forget, I'm wondering if that's in charges for services rendered for the fire marshal stuff. Because it's pretty substantial. It was 16,000, then it was 8,000, it was 7,000. So I wonder if some of those fees would go in there. I know he's done that because I've talked to him about it before. So that might be the account. I can't understand why it's so low for 2014 unless it's just because we were so, we didn't have as many businesses starting up or something. I'm not sure. But I'm wondering if it's in that account. But I think what I'd like to see, and maybe this is what I was trying to say when we had our first and second sessions and Kurt was here, and I did my little soliloquy and nobody seemed to understand what I was saying, but from my experience with the budget, what I would expect is Kurt would stand up here and say, all right, we're starting the new budget. And I would expect that the budget information would say $2,000 increase, very similar to what Jason did. $2,000 increase because. $400 decrease because. Rate increase because. And that's the justification I was talking about. And I think if he starts out with explaining his budget to us, it may eliminate a lot of the questions. And to balance that out, if he would say, I'm looking at hiring another person. This is what it's going to cost. And this is why. I have this and this and this and this and this to do. I can change my schedule. I can increase overtime. I can put them on 6 days a week. I can do this. That, in my mind, that's what I've had to present, and that's what I've had presented to me as far as explaining a budget. And that's what I meant from the beginning about him justifying whatever increases. I've never liked the fact that he just waits till the last minute and puts everything, he puts his wish list in and then says, but this is how much money I have to do it.
If you, and I don't mean to interrupt, but you know, what you're asking for, when you read his narrative and he puts it in that water system salaries, I'm requesting the addition of one service worker position. We last added staff in 2007. Since then, the size and complexity of the water system has grown faster than our capability to keep up with demand. We have expanded our daytime service hours to better serve our customers, but the service requests have correspondingly increased, and we are falling behind in our system maintenance. The use of building and ground staff to assist with water system work has not been successful. I am proposing to add one full-time 5-day workweek service worker.
I realize that.
He's trying to be clear with what you're asking for there.
Yeah, and maybe that was a bad example to use. But if, it kind of goes back to what we said before. If Pete's going to go in and ask a question and then we don't get the answer, and you and Randy go in and ask a question and get an answer, and we don't hear it until the discussion comes up, and then he's telling us stuff isn't getting done, what is not getting done? What, you know, if he's got valves that need to be opened, a service worker could do that. And that's a great suggestion to say, maybe we need to reposition some of the workers in the departments. It's frustrating to think, I'm not saying he's doing anything wrong. I know he believes what he thinks is important. I know he's trying to give us what we want. He's trying to satisfy the customers. He's very diligent and very knowledgeable about his job. And like I said, I'm not saying he's doing anything wrong, but I think it would help if we have this much discussion, and I can't wait for that CIP. I think that and the rate study will be phenomenal, or the charge for services rendered. I think that's going to make next year's budget so much easier. But I'd still like to have him, he's not specific enough, I think, for me. Okay, that's enough of that dead horse. The other thing we have to think about is I believe the wages are 2%. Manager Gerard was saying last time across the board.
We built them at 2% as an estimate.
Right. The fire department's asking for $1 an hour because it's supposed to be, if you look over the last 4 years or 5 years or whatever it was, it's supposed to be less than the 2%. I don't feel comfortable not giving them the same as what we're giving everybody else. Because if you want to call them volunteer, on call, whatever, they're still employees of the township, and I don't like that we would be treating them differently than everybody else. So those are my final comments on that stuff.
Dan, anything to add?
Then I had a phone call from a person, and she wanted to say how good the fire department was, if that makes any difference. She said she had a seizure, and they were there within 4 minutes, her husband said.
It's
So,
awesome.
here on Woods, so that was pretty
I
fast.
would
So she just
send a-
wanted to thank me, so I wanted to thank yous or whatever, so.
Send a card to the fire department, that would be the best thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 minutes, she said.
I want to bring it up during a regular board meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I think we lost little
Quite a
lot
few
of that
people.
stuff that the fire department did not get.
Because she heard sugar dropped, and she collapsed, and her husband didn't know what to do, so. He called, and they were there within 4 minutes.
I know they were there when my wife fell both times, and she's gotten to know 2 of them very well.
That's not good. That means they're there too often.
We saw a couple of them on the street, and she said, "Was that the one?" And I says, "Yeah, I want to talk to him." Okay, follow up a little bit on Lynn, on Kirk, trying to more explanation on why. And I'm looking back to what I had to do when I had to hire people. I had to really go into a lot of detail as to why work wasn't getting done, what had to be done, and everything else, and that, things like this here. The other thing we talked about a little bit is fire protection is $20,000, and what it should or should not be. And I brought up at the last meeting, I think we as a board must make the determination that is this going to be part of the water department cost, or is it going to be money that we're going to have to get from the fire department? That something like this, is it something that we want that's going to be built into the water department, so it's going to be there all the time? I don't know. It's just one of the discussion items that I think we have to come up with that as a board.
Thank you for mentioning that. I forgot to put that in mind.
And one of the things you brought up, Dennis, was about the evaluation of the township going up to 52 million, whatever. Part of that is the 5% we have to put in there every year from the state and whatever they guys do with the additional building. The biggest thing is the additional infrastructure that we have to put in every year to satisfy new businesses or to maintain what we have. If we have some idea what that's all about. So that gives us a little picture as to what we're moving into the future. And that's a moving number every year in that. That's enough for now.
Okay. Ready?
I guess my final comments of the evening is I was thinking of where I work, and the number of employees we have. We had 56 employees 4 years ago. We have 50 employees now, and they have not lowered any of the cost at all. So there's 6 less employees in our Public Works Department in the city of Marquette, and they've increased the rates 5%. And most of the public work services have increased rates also, and we have less people. So, so I think we've done a pretty good job with our crew, what we've had for our crew, and not expanding and increasing services. And I agree with the supervisor that maybe we can utilize maybe that additional public or building and ground staff person maybe as a backup public work or Ooh. I know where that came from. Utilizing that extra building and grounds person as maybe an extra service worker at times. I guess the question we can ask Kirk is if we back that additional position out, readjust your equation and see where it comes out. There still might be a small increase because we have fallen short on sales, and myself, I don't have a problem with the additional person. I just think it gives us additional protection in case someone gets sick. You got to remember, we have a small crew. People get sick. People have vacations. People have a variety of other things, and someone's gone, you gotta cover it with someone or your service suffers, so. I said enough for the evening.
Thanks, Randy. Dan, follow up? No. Pete, follow up?
No, I said it all the first time, and the list of, just surprising this year that when we talked about the pumping station in 553, that was not discussed much before. I mean, we should push that a little harder, so it's so important. We should get that done, fire protection to that end. And like Lynn said, if it was on the list of all the other, all the departments would put a list of priorities, and we would have seen that, but I didn't hear about that before. I guess it just in the background and stuff like that, so I think it's important for the fire department that they get that.
As, you know, part of getting better at the capital improvement planning and getting the department heads more involved. And as I said, I can't wait to see how this evolves and what this looks like as we move forward. Yep, I know, that's what I brought up, so that's, I'm like, it's in the CIP, but we've never,
We're over it, we don't discuss it at all.
but, you know,
I know.
yeah, we've approved it. I brought it up, oh yeah, you weren't here, Dan, when I asked my question to the fire department, and I said, here's the CIP, it's in here. It says that it's important. How come we're not budgeting money and making it happen? What are we doing wrong here? And I think Bob's like, yeah, I guess, you know, from a priority list, it got pushed down. Like, well, that's where we need to get better at, you know, using that CIP as a working document.
Well, I think also he was trying to work around, I'm not gonna put words in his mouth, but if I remember right, we were trying to work around with the DNR for a grant. And as well as working with the pit up there to try to get the
land.
to get the land and
Yeah,
stuff.
that's what he told us, is that part of the thing has been is a holdback on getting the necessary land to put the pump into place. Manager Gerard, anything to add?
No, I guess just a couple of comments with regard to Public Works and Building and Grounds. The reason Building and Grounds hasn't worked out is because we've dramatically increased the demands on Building and Grounds. We've now got, you know, multiple facilities to care for. We're building an ice rink. Kitty Park is being reconfigured. The ball field's been redone. I mean, all of those things fall under the auspices of Building and Grounds. In addition to the wintertime plowing for the lots, the various properties, the pedestrian ways that we've got, those kinds of things, keeping those clean as well. So that's the reason it hasn't worked out that well. We've got 6 employees, not counting Superintendent Page. We've got 6 employees in the water department. 2 are assigned to water, 2 assigned to wastewater, 2 assigned to our new water system, basically. So that's what you're dealing with. And, you know, the reason Kirk is asking for the additional position, and I supported that request and suggested another alternative, is because that would be a single-person position that could do things like exercising valves, taking care of the fire hydrants, the things that you don't need to have 2 people for. You know, Dan knows, I think Ernie knows from his experiences before, most of what we do has to have at least 2 people involved in it under OSHA requirements. If they're subsurface, 3 people. That means you've got, right now, one of your crews just standing around because there's nothing that they can do on that job unless they're down in the hole with them. So, I mean, that's what we're dealing with. How does Kirk put that into words for you to show you what's happening? Randy just said they've got 50 people at the city to manage a water and a wastewater system essentially the same size as ours, broken among the 2. We've got 6.
Well, actually, if I may say, we have.
You've actually got
we
30-something.
Yeah, we actually 50 people in Public Works, but out of that Public Works, we have probably about 10 people in the water department. Just water, not
Right.
wastewater.
But, you know, and that's what we're dealing with. You know, they're constantly involved in issues, particularly the ones that are involved with the wastewater system. Most of their time is spent in the shop rebuilding grinders or installing grinders, pulling grinders out. They're not out doing other things for the most part. So, I mean, that's what we're dealing with. You've got an expanding demand with a static staff. They need some help to be able to keep the system up. So, you know, I don't know how he justifies that, you know, in hard numbers for you.
Randy? It's just that when you say he's not doing nothing, that's the insurance man for the guy in the hole.
Well, but there's already, you know, if you have to have 2 down in the hole, you got 1 up at the top, then you got 1 more because they work in 2s.
Right, but but you always should have
So,
somebody
you know, and
out
that's, the people see people standing around, like, they don't understand why they're there.
Like I said, I'm not gonna add anything from what I've already said. I've got 2 pages of notes, and I'll write an email after this meeting and submit it out to Kirk, Fire Marshal, Manager Gerard, and request some follow-up and ask that it gets out to the board ASAP, so that you have it in case there's follow-up questions before we meet again on budget. Lynn?
Would it help to have a part-time person? And then we've got the benefits we don't have to get so involved with either. Get somebody started if he's just gonna be a leg man to be like a gopher is what I'm thinking.
Well, it's not so much a gopher as much as it's somebody who's actually doing work that doesn't require 2 people. You know, and that, whether it's reading meters, whether it's exercising valves, whether it's doing maintenance on a hydrant, you know, things that can be done by 1 person. You know, those are all things right now that 2 people are doing.
So would it help to have just a part-time person?
It
Or is
certainly
it-
would help, but I don't know how much, you know,
Well,
how
then
much
you've-
benefit there would be for doing that.
You've got the chance to train that person too, and by the end of the year, next year or the year after, if they want full-time, maybe somebody doesn't want full-time.
And I guess that's actually a question for Kirk, you know, in terms of how he could schedule that. The suggestion that I made, you to add 2, was to basically be able to get us to 2 shifts. So we could cover a broader time frame, cut back on call-out, cut back on overtime. I mean, it was just a suggestion to throw out, because eventually, you know, we're gonna get there. I mean, you're gonna see a request for an expansion of the number of firefighters at your next board meeting. Same reason. More to do.
Thanks, Randy. Ernie?
When you talk about changing the schedule or expanding it, could you put something in writing? I'm having a hard time visualize how that would work in that too.
Well, right now, what we're running into, we're on 10-hour days. And basically what that means is, around weekends, you're down to 2 people on, basically, because you got people that have worked their 40 hours, now they're off essentially for 3 days. I want to go back to an 8-hour schedule. So, you know, we'll have 5 8-hour days, 2 shifts, and you can rotate them to cover on weekends. So you wouldn't have call-out, you wouldn't have somebody on call, you'd have somebody working.
Follow up a little bit on Lynn on part-time. Reading the meters, that's done once a month or however time frame it is, and for a couple, 3 days, it's gonna take.
Yeah, right now they're trying to swap meters out, trying to change out meters and also set them up on automatic reads, as well as
Go to
just
the,
reading.
Telemetry so that they can
I
read it
just-
as they
Yeah, so
get
then
through
they won't
this.
need the 2 people to go read meters,
Yeah.
because it'll be.
Because that takes.
Well, you
out-
still
that's
have to
not
go,
so-
you still have to be there to scan the meter. I mean, you still have to have a person doing it. They're not automatic reads all the time, only if
They
people
will
sign up.
be
But you
With the
won't need 2
telemetry as we
people.
move forward.
No, that would be something that 1 person could do. Right now, you've got 2 people doing it, because you have 2-person crews out.
The biggest challenges that they have reading the meters right now is they're like, you know, Kirk, I have to take 4 days, I have to go read the meters, and you got 2 guys running to do it, but as soon as something happens and they get called, they have to stop reading meters and run, so then it gets
Right.
to crunch time where, you know, Brenda's yelling, look, the bills have to go out, you know, I've gotta have meter reads, and they're like, you know, what do you want me to do? Kirk's telling me I have to do this, and, you know, from Kirk's standpoint, you have to operate and maintain a system, number 1. If that means the meters don't get read, it means the meters don't get read. And I understand that, because it's about operations and maintenance.
Right, and that's why we've been trying to go to the phone read system, you know, the automatic reporting, but to have the phone read system, you have to have a hard telephone line, and a lot of people are giving those up, going
Phone
to cell
read
phones.
system is done, they're not
Yep.
using it anymore. They
Yep.
changed my phone read system out a couple weeks ago to put it so that I have one of the things on the front of the house now, so
Yep.
that eventually it'll have the
Reader.
bigger box on it, they'll be able to pick it up. With the new location and the antenna there and everything else, we're in good shape for having that telemetry to be able to do this. Is gonna be a real time saver. It is an investment to make that happen, it's gonna
Correct.
cost us some money to get there, but it will be a good thing in the long run, where we're not having 2 people spend 4 days running around reading meters. I mean, it's an expensive proposition.
I think, again, on what Lynn said on the part-time, you only need really one person reading meters when they're out in the field. You only need two people out there, and that for any reason. So you have one person out there reading, and if you can figure out how to utilize that individual, say, for 25 or 30 hours a month, you combine reading the meters with something else and do a part-time bit. And
Well, sure, I mean, certainly you could do that. I mean, the question is there a real benefit to that? Is it gonna solve the issue? I mean, that's the question. And that, I can't answer that question for you, that's a Kirk question.
For building and grounds, and if we have, you know, whether it's Chad or Greg on building and grounds, who is also jobs classification as service worker / building and grounds, then maybe it makes more sense where they're treated
Combine
as a
'em.
service worker, but they're also a service worker who still takes care of Lions Field or something. I mean, if that works, if that helps take some of the pressure off the department, who knows? I mean,
I think there's all kinds of different ways to go. I think we have to kind of explore them all at this point in time, to see what, they may not be workable.
Well, and they are, and, you know, and the township's biting off more and more all the time. I mean, you know, we're putting a world-class ice rink up, you know, that's gonna require maintenance, it's gonna require maintenance every day. Somebody's gonna have to be out there every day taking care of that ice, scraping it, cleaning it, watering it. You know, so those things happen.
I just want to comment on building and grounds becoming a part for Kurt. That makes more sense to me than anything else. From one standpoint, we have two trucks sitting out here in the parking lot. There's no reason they can't be parked in the garage. That garage is big enough to put those two trucks in, you know, even with whatever they're putting in there. So there's, you know, I agree. I think they should be under Kurt and be housed up at that building up there. There's no reason to really have them here.
Yeah, and there's not in there right now because they're still working on the floor in there. But what we're actually doing at this point is we're converting the, potentially the Cox pump house to building and grounds. So there'll be a garage for them to have the vehicle in, as well as an office to operate out of, which they don't have here, and we're in violation of the fire code ourselves.
a lot of information for the next one. When are we getting together again?
Not till after the meeting, because election night, we have the board meeting, just to remind everyone, the next board meeting is on Monday. The election's Tuesday, and then we'll have to schedule some additional sessions on next board meeting Monday, because I really don't want to be here late Monday night. So I have to be back here very early, so. I still think it leaves us a whole month, well, at least a month, to get through what we need to get through. I think we're ahead of schedule compared to last year, so.
Actually, you've got the month of, yeah, you've got the month of November. December 3rd would be when you'd have to be considering adopting a budget, December 3rd.
Yeah, December 3rd, I believe, is the public hearing, and then we have to have that public hearing December 3rd. The budget has to be passed by the 31st, so.
Correct.
So can,
What do we have left that we have to go over in the board budget?
We've gotten through everything. The fee schedule was the last thing that we needed to go through.
Did we do township improvements?
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
Yes.
You were gone, Dan. If you have any questions, I guess that would be the time to ask for Manager
Yeah, I
General.
mean, you can actually bring that up right now, Dan. We got time if there's some things on township.
Well, I'm
improvements
just,
to
I'm a little
discuss.
confused because I was going over the township improvements, and I'm confused from the standpoint of, under the township improvements 246, there's nothing in here for recreation. And I know that that's a separate item, but it is under township improvements, and there's nothing under the 246. But if we go to the actual last page of it, to the history, we're showing, we're actually not showing anything in 2015 either. So I guess my question is where is the money that we have in there for recreation?
It's in the recreation capital.
But is that also not a part of?
No,
township
it's
improvements?
under the general fund. General fund budget, recreation capital.
Then why under the tab Township Improvement Fund. Or if you look at our balance sheets and budget sheets that Ernie sends us out, that's under recreation is under the Township Improvement.
There's recreation under capital improvements and in general fund. The money that I've budgeted has been under the general fund.
Then can you explain to me, I'm gonna try to find it, I noticed that we had, I think it was the last August, I believe, fund balance thing from Ernie. I believe we showed $15,000 for township improvements, recreation, and 300 and some thousand dollars, and I should say restricted funds, and 300 and some $1,000 under township improvements. I believe it was in the unrestricted funds. I'm curious, I guess what I'm curious is that 300 and some $1,000, what is that for? Is that for roads? I have to assume that that's for roads? That's
Part of it is
that's
under the
balance?
township improvements, yes, Warner Street. Primarily.
Well, but you're making your last payment for Warner Street next year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you have that budgeted, but you're still showing a fund balance of.
There would be a fund balance due to the growth, the taxable growth. Remember, we were gonna do Brookton Road with that?
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, but my question is that under the fund balances, in 2013, the township improvements was 337,188. And I believe that hasn't really changed much, because I believe in 14 in August, I think it's that much now. Is it?
87,329.
Yeah. And so is that $173,000 that you have budgeted for the last payment for Warner Street, is that a part of that fund balance?
It would be in that fund balance out of the township improvements.
Okay, so that's, I guess, what, 1,600 more, or 160-some thousand more is be left in the fund balance. Is that strictly for roads, or is that for roads and recreation?
That's for roads.
Strictly for roads.
Correct.
So I guess my question is when you were, and I watched the meeting, you were talking about the money for the ice rink and the money for the boards,
Mm-hmm.
which came to somewhere, I believe, around $100,000 in that area. And you said
Thereabouts.
that was budgeted.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question is where was that budgeted? I mean, where do we see that in here?
That's a that's a lowest question. I'm not sure where she's got that reflected, but it was budgeted both 2 years in a row. It was budgeted for both of those projects and set aside.
Well, and I guess I'm going to go back to what Lynn and I keep bringing up all the time, is that should that not have been a line item that we can see constantly? I mean, if we're putting money aside for recreation for ice rink or boards, like for instance, the fire department puts aside money for trucks, we see that in there. So when you say that it's budgeted, I guess my question is that's $100,000 that came out of someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't know where it came out of. That's kind of my question, is where did that come from? And I'm only saying this because I'm confused as to where this is coming from. And I know that we have a $100,000 grant for the warming shed.
Which
and
we have not received as yet, so that's not showing up anywhere.
Not received yet, okay, so that's not showing up anywhere
Nope.
whatsoever. Okay, so, again then, I'll go back to my question, and only because I just, when I was reading my papers when I got back that I noticed the RFP for the warming house project that's in the paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that it's only for concrete footings, flat work, electrical, plumbing, and heating.
Correct.
And I did bring this up before. I guess my question is I don't understand, if we have $100,000 for a warming shed, why are we only bidding out concrete footings, flat work, electrical, and plumbing and heating instead of the whole warming shed?
The whole project was bid.
Well, but
Block-
this is the purposes request for proposals to
block
seek
work.
services for the installation of concrete footings, flat work, electrical, plumbing, and heating. It doesn't show anything in here, and maybe I'm missing something, but it doesn't show
About
anything.
finishing the inside, or you mean?
Well, actually building the building itself.
Buildings block, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a block building, so that is about putting the building up, putting footings up, and then the block work.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, if you read this, it doesn't say that. That's why, I was just confused reading this. I was saying, well,
Yeah,
this is only showing me like the footings,
Yeah,
the base
that's-
concrete for the floor.
That's
I don't know
not the
what flat work
complete,
is, but electrical, plumbing, and heating.
yeah, that is not the complete bid, basically. That's directing you to contact for the full specification packet.
This is for the full building itself.
It is, but the specification packet has the detail, not
Okay.
the ad.
Okay, then it was a confusion factor for me, that's all, because like I said, I just started reading my papers and stuff. So anyway, I guess that was just my confusion. In fact, I would like to see, if we have more money if there is more money in somewhere for the rest, like the kiddie park and the rest of the work for Lions Field or whatever, if it's actually sitting there, I'd like to see that as a, like Lions Field Recreation Fund, whatever, call it whatever you want, but so that when we do take $100,000, I would like to see where it comes from, basically. That's all. That was just one of my questions, because I was confused trying to figure it out, which
I'll have that answered for you, Dan.
doesn't necessarily mean it happens to me all the time.
Oh, that's a good question. Good question.
Actually, you might see that sooner, Dan, because when Lois will make the adjustments, it'll come as a budget amendment.
Correct.
And then those probably you will see where the actual accounts that comes from.
And the one
It
was
just might
just-
be a little behind.
Yeah, one was just issued Thursday, I believe it was. The payment for the boards was just issued, and we just got the bill for the concrete work.
So I,
Actually, like I said, it was just, when Ernie's thing, we were like 2 months behind, right? 'Cause the last
Yeah,
one was
yeah.
August.
August, next week, you're gonna have the September. That-
But again, that's a one-day snapshot.
Right.
yeah, I believe I'll talk to Lois tomorrow about it, but I believe there'll probably be a budget amendment, and you'll see where that comes from.
And it's just something I think we should think about as a board. I mean, personally for me, I don't know about any of our other board members, but it's just, I would like to, if we're gonna have that, I would like to at least see that.
Got it. So we've got about 20 minutes if anybody's got anything else. Ernie?
Yeah, and I've talked about that Mercer, that our retirement, having a meeting with them. On the back page of today's paper, there's a very good article from the CEO of them. And I would suggest you may want to take it through and read it in that, because he talks about a few things in there, unfunded liabilities and the different types of plans and that too. So it's interesting reading in that too, so just. I was surprised it was back there and it was much as it was in that too. So.
Anyone else?
One question to the manager, Gerard. Do we have anyone with military time here?
Yes.
Okay, how do we handle that if they request to purchase it? Because I know it's going to be a certain percentage on our part.
No, it won't be. It's fully funded by them.
It's fully funded?
Yeah.
Okay. so we-
Military, purchase military service, you can purchase up to 5 years of military service, but they foot the full bill for it, unless the board wants to participate.
Okay, because I know, and this isn't our policy, but the city of Marquette tonight on their agenda has someone purchasing military time, which is going to cost the city, I think, like $59,000.
Yeah, the governing body has to approve the purchase, but does not have to participate in the purchase.
Okay.
You may have in your contract, there may be a language in your contract or in your plan document that says that the city pays a portion of it.
Yeah, it was a policy that was set many years
Yeah.
ago. So
We don't have that.
Okay. So I was just wondering, because I mean, you don't want a big expenditure on funded liability coming
No,
up.
right now, we have 3 former military,
So if they choose,
regular employees, not counting the on-call firefighters.
which
but
if they choose, they can purchase time, but it's their full
the
boat.
Yeah, the military, anybody with military service can purchase up to 5 years of service credit, and anybody in the system can purchase up to 3 years of generic service. But it's expensive. Because basically you pre-fund. As a, for instance, if Kirk, let's say, well, not 4, Kirk is also former military, so there's 4. But if Kirk now, at his age and his service level, number of years of service, wanted to buy service credit, he'd probably have to sell his daughter, probably. It would be extremely expensive, because the requirement is that you fund your debt. You fund, it's a pre-fund pre-funded calculation. So in other words, it's designed such that if they come purchase that service, it doesn't put you behind on your funding. They have to pre-fund that.
Thank
Because the
you.
intention is they probably are going to retire soon.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Anything else?
I have one more.
Sure.
We don't, in the budget right now in debt service, we don't have any payments for any of the principal and interest on some of our debt. And I know we had an extension, not an extension, but we were only paying interest on these facilities for a
Correct.
while or something. So,
Correct.
and we
Interest
typically
only.
just pay stuff once a year. We just do principal
We
and
make our
interest
payment once a year.
So.
We've got all of them on annual payment.
Is it right, like next month or December? Because there's nothing in
November.
here through June.
Yeah, it's we will have our first actual payment to due. We've been making payments, but we'll have our actual first payment due in December on this building,
Okay,
scheduled payment.
because we were just paying interest or something, right?
Well, we've been making payments. We've been making regular payment out of the budget. You know, recall in last year's budget, we had fire department, the budget put 84,000 in, and we put 150-some thousand in, and we made those payments against the principal, although we only had to pay interest.
Because there wasn't anything in here for anything, for
Yeah,
Cornerstone.
you wouldn't see the debt retirement because we haven't accrued the debt yet. It starts in 2015. We make our first payment at the end of this year, so you'll see it in the 2015 budget reflected.
Okay, I got you. Okay.
Other questions? Dan?
Just a clarification, and I'm thinking back to last year's budget when we were doing it for the fire. Didn't the fire department budget 80,000 last year?
We did, yes.
And
84,
84, and they
That
paid,
was-
so
yeah.
that actually went to the.
It did.
So we actually did make a payment,
yes.
as well as the 250,000.
That went to River Valley Bank last Thursday.
So, okay.
And they did make that 250,000?
Yeah, last Thursday. I hand-delivered it to Todd Horton last Thursday, so it's made directly against the principal, no interest.
Now, is that broken down between the three entities now?
No, that was only fire department. That 250 was fire department only. That was basically the proceeds from the sale of the old fire hall minus 50,000 that was used for furnishings in the new hall.
I went right against their debt.
Correct.
Way up. Anything else? All right, I got a long couple emails to write. And we'll take it back up, second forum discussion on Monday.
Are we
Just to follow up to the questions that we've asked.
Keep it